thank you everyone for joining. My name's Callan Quinn. I'm a reporter at The Block. And I'm just going to ask you guys, first off, can you introduce yourselves briefly? And yeah, would you like to start, Sasha?
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Sasha. I'm a partner at Atomico. We're a venture capital firm initially set up by Niklas Zennström, who is the former CEO and founder of Skype. 16 years later, we're now investing out of our sixth fund, which is over $1 billion. We do early stage investments, primarily in Europe, and then we do Series B plus investments both in Europe and the US. And then my focus at Atomico is developer tools, open source, and Web3 as a part of that broader theme of selling and catering to developers.
Hey guys, my name's Fig. I'm building a cross-chain swap protocol, which is using Callan network to route liquidity between chains. And you can build applications on top of us, NFT marketplaces, anything which does payments cross-chain.
Yes, hi everybody. I'm Tom Henriksson, one of the general partners at OpenOcean. We are a VC focusing on early stage, kind of A round minus. European software businesses. We have a background in building a few of those to great scale ourselves, including in the areas of open source and developer tools.
All right, hi everyone. My name is Filip. I'm one of the founders of Moralis, and we're a development platform for Web3 developers. And we help developers build dApps cross-chain, cross-platform, while cutting down the complexity in terms of building infrastructure and building backend.
Great, thanks guys. Okay, so we're looking at decentralized apps with a little twist and how they kind of connect with developer tooling and what's available on the market at the moment and how that's developed. So can I have someone sort of bring us up to speed about the evolution of developer tooling over the past, well, however far back you want to go? Yep.
Well, if I can start, but from a very, very high level. So I was actually a venture capitalist for the first time in 1999, if you can believe it. Then I did, between my first VC firm and joining OpenOcean in 2011, I actually did real work. I was running a software business, thank goodness. But in 1999, there were no developer tool software companies. Or if there were, we had never heard about them, and even if we had heard about them, none of them would have reached anything interesting when it comes to growth, scaling, valuation, and all those things that a venture capitalist looks for. Yes, there were some under Microsoft and what have you, but this was not the area you would look for an investment in as a VC. We did invest in 2001 then in MySQL, which is not a developer tool per se, right? It's for database administrators, but it's a database which has a huge developer community. So that's where I started to get into all of this. And nowadays, actually, we do about a third of all our investments in this area. And the market has changed like crazy. Enterprise software grows at about 7% per year. Developer tools software grows at 14 to 15% a year, and it's poised to hit about 10 billion in value in the next few years. So now it's as hot as it comes, and I'll let somebody else speak to why it's hot.
Yeah, and I can speak a little bit about how it's developed within Web3. And I would say the journey is similar to other journeys within computer science in general, where there's been more and more abstractions on top of the protocols. Similar to when you started building computer applications in general, you started programming in assembly on the CPU, and then we have more and more abstractions on top. And that's been the same in Web3 when I started out, 2014, 2015 building, everyone was building just using the blockchain nodes. You were interacting directly with the blockchain nodes. You would run your own node, first of all, which is today pretty uncommon, at least if you're on Ethereum. That creates a big hassle. You have to run your own infrastructure, but then also the nodes are quite primitive from a technology standpoint, so it's very hard to get up to speed. It will take you months just to do some initial setup. And we've evolved a lot from there, and now there's plenty of great development tools. It started out with just outsourcing the actual node hosting yourself so that you could let someone else run these big blockchain nodes with lots of data, and you can just ask them for the data that you needed. But still with that, there was a lot of complexity in it because of how the blockchain nodes are designed, where you have individual smart contracts that you would have to query. So on top of that, people started building data aggregators and stuff. And now we come sort of to the next point where, at least with Moralis, you have all of that abstracted away as well, and you have a framework similar to what you would have in Web 2 to building Web 3 applications, which makes it easy for a lot of web developers to come into the Web 3 space.
I think maybe just to build on that latter point in terms of developers coming into Web3 space, one of the things that was quite striking for me is if you look at the developer population in Web2, it's like 28-ish million by various estimates. And then when you look at Web3, it's like at best 150, maybe 200,000 developers that contribute somewhat to Web3 and they build applications. But I think what Filip mentioned in terms of democratizing access is one of the critical elements that we at least see on our side, because at the end of the day, you cannot assume that everyone will be proficient in, managing the nodes themselves, running all of the required infrastructure that isn't required for those, killer decentralized applications. Because before there is a demand and before there is a market of good applications that are built, you need to incentivize and you need to provide tools to developers for them to be able to build those good applications. Otherwise, you're running into a problem that everyone wants it, but no one can build it because at the end of the day, it's like so technically challenging.
So what do developers in Web3 actually want from their tools?
Well, I guess you want to make it as easy as possible for a developer to build the app that they want to build. And we've talked about nodes a couple of times. I run validated nodes sort of in my spare time, and it's fun, but it's a 24/7 job, and you need to have a lot of background in a different part of programming. So yeah, we don't want app developers to need to have to manage these things. So I guess companies like you guys allow someone to spin up this sort of virtual blockchain in their local environment. I think an interesting difference with Web3 or with crypto and Web2 is that every blockchain has its own special characteristics. Even if you replicate it one-to-one on your computer, it's going to be a different environment to the one that's out there in the real world, because the one in the real world has other people interacting with it, and also it has all these different validators validating the blockchain, whereas on your computer it's just yourself. So we need to be able to replicate those systems, those really complex systems, just on your laptop so that you can code your application, see how it responds. And now that we have multiple blockchains as well, the world's going to cross-chain now. We have Ethereum, Solana, Near, and potentially there'll be millions of blockchains in the future. We need to be able to replicate multiple blockchains on our computers and then interact with them and send messages between them, like having our own internet just in our local environment. So it's very complex, and I can see why the industry is becoming more valuable because from a VC point of view, because there's a real need for it compared to, say, what there was before.
I know this is mainly about Web3. I actually don't know much about Web3. In our partnership, our friends at Fabric Ventures takes care of Web3. They're on the forefront. So actually all our developer tool investments are still in the Web2. They might have decentralized architectures and so on, but they're not actually real Web3 things. But I will say, though, in my world of software developer tools, it's not although it's easier to build something because there's more tools to do all kinds of things, the things they're building are much more rich and complex already. So guess what? To do just a cloud-hosted app, you need to use at least tens of tools if you're building something slightly bigger. And guess what? Even when they are as elegant and easy to use as we'd like them to be, those are the ones that get that option, still you need to learn them. And there's a lot of time and effort needed to be able to do that in today's world, just in Web 2.
Yeah.
I'm sure Web 3 is more tricky.
Yeah, I mean, in many ways it's similar, right? You want to be able to build your prototype fast so that you can go to market and test your idea, right, as an entrepreneur. And most people then don't want to spend months setting up the infrastructure to do that. And it's similar in Web 2, where you don't want to spend the resources running all of this on-prem infrastructure. I mean, when there are tools like AWS that has a whole suite of tools that just lets you get up and running, many people pick that. But in the Web3 space, there are, of course, differences. And as our friend here said, you run your own nodes, and I'm sure you enjoy it, right? It's part of the fun for many people, and the real OG Web3 people, they do enjoy that. So that's a part of the developer base as well. But the trends we see are definitely towards more abstractions, especially, like you've all been saying as well, the complexity goes up. And now in blockchain as well with cross-chain, where people don't want to build themselves into a corner while they build their entire application on one chain, where they might feel like, I don't know if this chain is going to be the most popular one in a year or 2 weeks. So they want to build cross-chain. And that adds further complexity because not all chains are the same. And the developer tool market has reacted. And now there are at least better tools to do it. But I'm sure we'll see a ton of more evolution. But the people building with us, they're looking for that speed. They're looking to test their ideas quickly, go to market quickly, focus on the user experience, which, I mean, is really part of our core, letting the entrepreneurs and builders focus on building better user experience than what we have, because that, we believe, is going to unlock this next wave of growth. Because the UX that we see today in crypto Web3 is not fantastic. And you know that if you've used it.
One of the things we were discussing before the panel in terms of developer experience in Web3 versus Web2, I think what is quite interesting is the focus on pleasing the developer is much more, I think, in Web2. In Web3, it's just like bare survivorship. So it's like as long as you can provide at least some UX, it's already good enough, because the complexity of the technicalities of it is so high that you would be happy if it at least alleviate some of the pain points rather than solve the entire, value chain for you as a developer.
That's not the way to get 10 million developers.
No. And I was on another panel this morning, and we discussed this as well. And someone mentioned the fact that MetaMask, they have 30 million monthly active users, right? Which is a ton. But it's even more when you see how bad the application is to actually use. I mean, it's a horrible user experience for a wallet. You have to add your assets manually if they're not there. You have to add networks manually. It's a mess. And still we have 30 million users. So there's a lot of potential if we can just get more people focused on that problem.
Mm-hmm. Sasha, you talked a bit about sort of pain points for developers. What are the biggest pain points you guys are seeing at the moment?
I mean, I've touched upon it a little bit already, where there's a ton of complexity. Take, for example, because I experienced this myself, which is where we came up with the idea of Moralis. We were building a chat application for a live streaming service, and we're going to gatekeep that with NFT, where you got certain perks based on the NFTs that you had in your wallet, like a sort of membership tiers. And we thought that would just be a simple application. Someone would log into their MetaMask, which is in the browser. Then we could use MetaMask to pull in the NFTs that the user were holding, and then see which NFTs they were holding. But that turned out to be a huge problem, because NFTs reside in individual smart contracts. And to find out which NFTs they hold, you have to ask all of the different smart contracts where you're looking. And if you want to pull in all NFTs, you have to look at all NFT smart contracts. So it's just the way that this API to the blockchain nodes is structured. It makes it very, very difficult for some of these applications where it's incredibly primitive, where you have to ask a bunch of smart contracts for the same thing. And the same thing goes for authentication, because you could easily spoof something on the front end pretending to be someone else holding an NFT. So then we also came up with the whole authenticate use case, which is the base of Moralis, where you have, as a developer, one line of code to authenticate your user, no matter the wallet or chain, and then you immediately get this user profile with their NFTs, tokens, etc. So you can instantly query that across chains without this complexity of the node. And that is one pain point. The other one is cross-chain, as we've discussed already. Those are the main ones that I see. Another pain point is definitely the sort of abstraction layer of the wallet, many gaming use cases that we have, clients of ours, want to abstract the whole wallet creation experience out of the onboarding of their game, because it's just something, a friction that they don't want to introduce. Just because they introduce Web3 elements like NFTs or other tokens in their game, they shouldn't need to implement the wallet interface to begin with. You could still have your items in game, and then if you want to withdraw them later on, you could do that. But then you can introduce the wallet interface later on. So that's also something that we've seen bigger demand of, being able to abstract that away and to expose that to the user at a later stage in their application journey.
Yeah, we've come across similar things. I think this, to be able to benefit from the sort of the beauty of these decentralized systems, which anyone can access. It's the whole point of it. It's permissionless. But to replicate that in your local environment is really time-consuming. So because we're building cross-chain, it's quite new. There's not as much tooling around it. We had to build a bespoke script basically for pulling all of the Uniswap contracts. Uniswap is an exchange which anyone can access and you can trade assets between. And we interact with Uniswap on, say, Ethereum, and Uniswap on Polygon, on Moonbeam, which are different blockchains. And we had to make a script to pull all of the different instances of these exchanges across and all the tokens, and then potentially all of the distribution, who owns those tokens, just so that we can start testing it in our local environment. So that's an example of a pain point for us.
One of the things that I spent quite some time in 2018, I worked briefly for a smart contracts security company in the Valley in 2018, and at that time it felt that people don't spend enough attention and time on security of smart contracts because it's one way you deploy it and there is very little room for you to fix it. And 4 years later, the problem still exists. I think that's, at least in my mind, that's one of the biggest pain points that is A, not solved yet, but also B, very hard to solve because of technicalities. As you said, you add additional chain, it's another vector of attack. You add, additional user, it's another vector of attack. So from that perspective, developers are also not security experts and they're not thinking about security. And the more you abstract the complexity of the underlying infrastructure, the more you introduce your own opinion into, the architecture of the application. And therefore, things where people lose $600 million, not to name that specific incident, but that was very, I think, very good example of things, being on the other side of decentralization, where you cannot call your bank or whoever owns the product and say, oh, I had my money, you didn't do your, job, and you should repay me. And from that perspective, usually security is something that people resolve as the last thing, like once it's already in the wild. But I think, if we need to come to a point where decentralized applications are mass adopted, security has to be at the forefront of, the mentality of developers, how they think about architecture, and not leaving vectors of attack for hackers.
Yeah,
I'm sure that is one, but I actually want to test one hypothesis with you, dear fellow panelists, because back in the MySQL days, this is 20 years ago, we learned a few things about how to build a community, a massive community, right? And it was Monty, my colleague, Monty, who's the CTO of MariaDB nowadays, the successor company. But I mean, he was amazing in, building tight code that could deliver something that is this big at Oracle and this efficient at MySQL in an open source environment. But he worked like crazy on making it as easy as possible. So you could download MySQL in 10 minutes. You could get to value in 20 minutes or an hour if you were not as capable as some others. So get to actual value real fast. He was extremely quick on bug fixing, first himself, then a small community, then a bigger community. But the critical bugs, they got fixed really fast. Customer support was very, very good. There was always an updated online manual back in those days, and so on. So he made it so accessible to all the developers, and they loved him for it. We still use this kind of a checklist for making investments in open source and developer tool software businesses, because we think these are essential. And now my question to the fellow panelists is this true still in these simple things actually? Are they still true in the Web3 era?
I think we have this meme in crypto which is a bit debunked, but it's called testing in prod, and which is where a developer just throws some code out onto the live blockchain and people start using real money on it, and it's exposed to get hacked by anyone. And this is really the perfect way of testing your code, is how quickly or how long can it last before it gets hacked. And if you take a step back from that, maybe we shouldn't actually test in prod, maybe we should test in test, but prod being production, it's a developer term. But that idea paired with open source, which is what Web3 is sort of all about. All the code is public, so you can copy it, and the contracts which have been out there in the wild, sort of in a natural sense, they've survived through evolution. They've been naturally selected, and then we can take those bits of really well-tested code and then like build on top of them. So I guess that's a difference in maybe the testing. The developer tooling is almost, the live blockchain itself is a developer tool in a sense, just because all of the code out there is available for anyone to iterate on. It's not just the developers who've deployed it who can upgrade their code. It's, a 16-year-old kid in their bedroom can often like do a better job of something than a company has just by tweaking a few small things. So.
But maybe Vic, to you and Filip, like because you work, with applications directly, do you feel that might be a bit detrimental to the ecosystem? Because if you throw something in the wild and people get burned, there will be no mass adoption. If there is no mass adoption, like developers will not be incentivized to build another application. We've all seen what is happening with the price of different coins, and that definitely disincentivize some of the developers to switch to Web3, because if previously you could have earned your living, maybe now it's a bit harder, not to say impossible, but a bit harder. The same here, if you throw something and people just start tweeting that, oh, I lost my money with that app or this app or that thing happened, it might be a good way to test the application, but overall, holistically speaking, it might be a bit harder than to regain the credibility.
Definitely,
yeah. It's a PR problem that is caused by this open mentality, which at the core of it is really good, right? It's an open source community, but when you pair that with programmable money, it gets tricky pretty quickly. And I don't know how we're going to solve that. I think better security tools for sure. I mean, it is hard to debug a smart contract for security and check it. So definitely better tools. But I'm also sure that regulation is going to come in at some point. I don't think we're going to go down that rabbit hole. But when you see $600 million hacks there and Luna crash here, it's an easy door for politicians to sort of smash in and do something about.
Yeah.
So what was your question, Tom? I got sidetracked.
Do the good old kind of simple tricks, but really being there, making it so easy, accessible, valuable for the developer. Do they still apply in your world?
I would say that we're building them, yes. Those simple things, or making them simple. Because we want to build that sort of aha experience when you do it. It's like, wow, this was incredible.
Now, when you say we, you mean?
Oh, yes,
you?
yes.
Yes.
I would say we're one of them doing it. There are many great companies building developer tools, but we're definitely one of them.
Okay, Tom, here's a question for you. Do you see, yourself or your company looking at Web3 developer tools as a potential avenue for investment in? You know what?
I could actually not hear your question because since I can't have the headphones on, can you say again?
Okay. Is your company looking at investment in Web3 development tools in the future?
Yeah, so it's a great question. I mean, we do see many, right? But if it's really a Web3 thing, we actually channel it over to Fabric Ventures. We can invest together with Fabric in such. It's a little bit tricky because coming from open source software background, we run into that, and the future, of course, is an even more open and decentralized architecture. So we know we will be there and make more of those investments directly into Web3 as well. As far as we've come so far, this is maybe a bit funny, is we just invested in something called Strong Network, which is kind of a decentralized architecture. So it's for enterprises, a way of having enterprise developers safely develop code safely from the perfect perspective of the enterprise. It's web-based, so finally the web is fast and good enough, and hey, this has been said for 20 years at least, maybe 30 years, that it's going to be good enough to actually develop software in a true online fashion. But now when you can really do it, you can safeguard the code, you can have amazing real-time allocation of resources and permissions and so on. So it is a decentralized mode, kind of, but it's not a real Web3. So that's where we are at the moment.
So in terms of kind of keeping on the theme of kind of comparing Web 2 and Web 3 development tools, when it comes to building dApps, are you seeing any sort of trends or patterns in the sort of tools that are becoming available?
I think, Filip, you should have stats.
Yes, but I'm also a little bit biased because, I mean, obviously we see people flocking to Moralis because we introduced a new workflow for developers. So I'm very much in that bubble. So I'm not generally I'm not generally aware of sort of the movements in the market apart from what I see within our own company, and that's that people have been missing simple tools for a long time. And when we launched in June of last year, we very quickly signed up 100,000 developers, and now we're over 200,000 developers that have signed up. So there's a great need for simple tools, and the trend once again that we see is more abstractions on top of the decentralized networks at the core of it, and people wanting to have more similar experiences to what they see in Web 2. And that's also, I think, why Moralis have seen maybe a greater conversion of traditional web and app developers into Web 3 than some of the more Web 3 native tools.
One other topic that you mentioned is cross-chain operability. And at least in our experience, what we see getting adoption, that thing that Filip, you mentioned in terms of making the choice of the chain itself is quite a big threshold, right? It's basically a product-defining experience and product-defining decision that you make at the onset without even understanding, how users might be using your product, and therefore things that help you bridge, for the lack of better word, it doesn't mean the bridge between chains, but bridge the experience from one chain to another chain and make it more scalable. Because at the end of the day, each chain will have their own set of users, and you want to tap into the broadest market possible. But that's not like, if you think about deploying something on Solana or Near or something, like it has a defined limitations of it being loved and hated by certain groups, and you'll be appealing to one versus another. What we've seen is, be that scalability, be that security, be that maintaining the user experience across chains, like if you can scale from one chain to multiple chains, like that's pretty much like the problem of day one that you need to solve. And that's why developers, at least in our experience, developers are very keen to try it, whether they will be willing to pay enough to make a viable, to Tom's earlier point, the size of the outcome to make a viable business. I think that's TBD, but
yeah,
looks promising.
Cross-chain is really a scaling solution at the end of the day, and we've seen these other blockchains pop up because we need more block space, we need more computation, decentralized computation, and from my point of view, it doesn't seem to make sense for a developer to just choose one blockchain. They might as well deploy in all the environments. There's pluses and minuses in that, but up until now, we've seen these communities pop up for each blockchain. I think largely because a bunch of people have gotten really rich buying tokens, and then they've, well, maybe not anymore very rich, but in the last couple of years, yeah. So they've become very loyal to their specific chain. But the end sort of vision, which I see in the blockchain space, is that that's not going to be as relevant. There won't, 10,000 people who bought a token in the early days aren't really going to be the ones deciding whether a blockchain has all the users or not. And once these cross-chain solutions are here really already. We're going to start seeing examples of applications built on them that utilize every chain. You may never know whether your transaction settled on Ethereum or whether it's settled on another chain, and that's only a positive, I think, for us. I mean, we don't want users really seeing all of the things happening in the background. We just want them to be able to press the button, and what they want to happen happens, like whether it's on one blockchain or another. We will need to, I think, amongst us in the community of developers and sort of nerds, talk about security, because it does matter whether something's settled on Ethereum, whether it's settled on my personal home blockchain, because I probably shouldn't be securing billions of dollars of liquidity on my PC, but I think
very thoughtful approach.
Hey,
very thoughtful approach.
Yeah. Well, yeah, you're welcome to if you like, but yeah, yeah. So I think we'll see chains maybe disappear a little bit into the background, and all the applications will seamlessly interact cross-chain. Just like we don't really think of the servers that the internet runs on. We just see an application running on the website, and whatever happens in the background happens.
Okay, let's open up to audience questions. If you have a question for one or all of our, yep. Someone will come around with a microphone, and you can ask.
Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yep.
All right. No, I was keen just to hear a bit more about how you think that development will change with the emergence of Web3 as a trend, sort of, more than the problems of the pains of development, which is pretty much the same as before, I guess, but with Web3, it's a different, there's a community build up that's happening, right? So, many say, for example, that, venture capitalists, who needs them? You hear that from the web, from the community out there of developers. Some that say, of course, we're here today generously hosted by Fabric, so of course we take that stand. But nevertheless, that exists, and one needs to admit that that it's a trend out there. Well, is there a trend towards let's say before in Web 1 and 2 you had consumer to consumer business and business consumer. Do you have like user to user application development coming as opposed to venture capitalist finance to users, right? You see what I mean?
Yeah.
Of course, you have all these problematics. You need time to develop. You need to have some financing, but that financing coming from community rather than corporates and venture capitalists.
Yeah, I think it's a great question.
I think it's a terrible question.
But I'm not sure that the guy in the audience is going to like my answer, because Moralis, I'm afraid to tell you, we have VCs backing Moralis. And we were actually contemplating when we did our seed round, whether to take the funding from what we call the crypto bros, we had some lined up, or to go the VC route. And the money would be the same, valuations would be the same. Maybe the paperwork is more heavy on the VC side than with the crypto bros. But in the end, we went the VC route, and it was for the experience of the firms that we would be working with, the business builder experience that they brought with them. And that turned out to be absolutely crucial. The networks, the contacts, the experience. And yet there is not an equivalent community that can come with the money, with the experience, the connections, and deliver that in the same way as a VC can, at least in my experience. But in terms of how it changes development, it's definitely moving in that direction. I mean, we see many protocols being built as communities. And we also see many communities rewarding their members with tokens, with assets that really, when it combines the open source world of contributing with the financial incentives to do so, right? So it's very exciting. And I think we could move in the direction where there will be, DAO VCs that will be able to come with the experience as well as the money. Because currently, it's more of you get a bag of money and then you're on your own in a way. That's still not the case with VC. But happy to hear from the VC guys as well what they think.
I mean, yeah, I totally agree that currently VCs still definitely play a role, but maybe those functions will be done by DAOs in the future, or maybe VCs just will be DAOs. Blockchain is regulatory technology in a way, so if you can replicate sort of an entity or a type of corporate governance on chain, then replicate VCs on chain. It's probably more efficient because they can invest just by voting on chain, or they can send in a transaction. And then, yeah, the developer experience, how it changes development. I think it's sort of, it's like a capitalist ideal to be able to have mobility through a system. So you're able to participate even if you don't have VC funding. If you want to work really hard, you're extremely talented, you come from a country where you don't have VCs and your family doesn't know VCs, you can still build a really great application and push it and get it into, it's possible to push through the system. And we've seen that in crypto many times with people just building really beautiful code and then deploying it and getting a lot of popularity. And crypto provides a crowdsourcing function as well to sort of kickstart these. And then the other thing you also mentioned is, I'm in a DAO structure, that's how our project runs, and some of the benefits of that are that devs can come and contribute part-time much more easily than they can in the traditional world. So it's almost a natural freelance marketplace where people can come and provide their value and get rewarded really frictionlessly. So that changes the experience as well. Yeah.
Can I ask a little follow-up question to that? So did you transition from like a more corporate structure to a DAO structure?
To a DAO structure? No, well, we started with the DAO structure. I think one thing that's changing is originally DAOs were, I think there was a lot of talk around them being these flat sort of kumbaya organizations where there's no leaders and everyone just does what they can. And there's still a place for those in certain instances, but we define ourselves as a product DAO. So a product DAO is more just like a standard corporation, but instead of having sort of all the legal structures around it, which determine whether someone can be employed and what their agreement is, it's done on chain instead, and then the coordination's done via these online tools like Discord is. I'm sure you guys know about it, but it's a gaming social media platform where everything we do is in the open, and even if it's not in the open to the public, it's in the open within the company, so everyone knows what's going on. Yeah, we stayed. So we've been a DAO the whole way through, and then once we scale to a very large organization, once we do, then we'll have the community as sort of an outer ring, who are also in the Discord, and then the community members who are more engaged will get chosen to be in sort of an inner sort of these community ambassadors. Some of them might get offered a more formal role, like a employment or a token agreement, and then we have maybe the core team who potentially we still have a standard traditional hiring pipeline. We might talk to recruiters or just hire however you would normally hire, but we also have these funnels coming from the community outside.
Cool.
Yeah.
So 3-4 years ago, VC will change, right? If I knew how it will change, I wouldn't tell you because that would be good to know. But 3-4 years ago, when the seeds of Fabric Ventures were set already, there were, it was the first wave of the crypto token startups, and we saw all these, hundreds of companies, right, that had, I call it, 2 persons, maybe a dog, and maybe a white paper. probably not even code, or if a very, very light code. And these were valued at 50 million, 100 million, whatever. At this time, we were quite concerned. We were really wondering, first of all, we were like, we can't invest in that at that valuation because they have almost nothing yet. So it was like, no. At the same time, we thought this will kill VC. Okay, it didn't yet kill VC, but it, of course, did enable new ways of funding cool startups building the future. And this will continue, I'm sure. What we learned already back in the first wave of open source ourselves, though, was that the difference between getting a product out that developers use and making a real business, especially now when I put it here in the Web3 perspective, in a B2B software environment, that is a massive difference, right? Most open source projects, which might even have amazing community traction, do not become businesses because you don't find that nice difference between the free, which attracted everybody, and then something that actually can become a business. So I think there's still some time, at least in the B2B software realm, where VCs can maybe support companies to find that in those few cases where they are to be found. Don't expect that they are to be found in all great products and all communities.
I think
that difference between free and for pay, it actually needs to be massive for enterprises to want to pay.
I think we probably have time for one more question.
Hi, I'm curious to hear, do you think that layer 0 will impact the way that we build developer tools on the blockchain? And if yes, then how?
And with layer 0, you mean Ethereum and the base layers, or?
No, actually,
company.
layer 0 that is supposed to kind of integrate all the blockchains together and provide interoperability between them.
Ah, I see.
Yeah.
The project called Layer 0, the name of it?
The company that is called.
Yeah, there is one project called Layer 0,
Yeah.
but there's also some others which are doing the same. So it's starting to be a bigger thing. So that's why I'm curious.
Yeah, generally, so there's a few protocols trying to take on this Layer 0 level. One of them is called Layer 0. We're building on a protocol called Callan network, which I personally think has the best security out of the cross-chain protocols, and allows generalized function passing, not just token passing between chains. And yeah, definitely think it'll change everything. I mean, being able to link up these blockchains is like going from not having the internet to having the internet in a sense. And if the Ethereum community is scaling vertically, so they're building rollups and other scaling solutions. But I think in order to really take on everything that crypto can, we need to scale horizontally as well. So yeah, I think it'll be huge. And we've talked about the problems in when we talk about cross-chain, that's what we're talking about, using these layer 0 protocols.
I think one of the bigger challenges with having something that is horizontal and unifies things is adoption. Because as it was with many other industries, IoT specifically, you have 15 different IoT standards, and then someone comes up with a brilliant idea of unifying all standards, and now you have 16 standards, and the thing goes on and on. So from that perspective, until it becomes kind of ubiquitous in terms of the adoption, and everyone accepts that as a way to build applications, you'll have, as we just discussed, oh, did you mean layer 0, the company? No, actually, the concept, and there will be like 15 different approaches to building the layer 0. Then will be, layer -1 that tries to unify all of the other layer 0s. We are an investor in Starkware, so we believe that there is other way to solve at least one part of the problem, the scalability. But from the perspective of, does it make sense? Absolutely. Like, would it work? Well, it's, developers will vote with their time and their attention.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, currently from where I'm sitting, interoperability seems to be the key to solving the issues, but that can change depending on what solutions pop up. But currently, I agree with you that currently we see so many different interoperability approaches that still you have this problem of, which approach should I take in terms of interoperability, because there are different solutions to this layer 0 problem.
Yeah.
Okay, we've got about 20 seconds left. Any last thoughts, guys?
Start building crypto. Everyone come.
Yeah, and happy to take any questions afterwards if you're around.
Yeah. I apologize to everyone whose questions we didn't get to. I'm sure if you find these lovely gents somewhere over the next couple of days, they'll be happy to oblige. Thank you so much for your time and for your insights.
Thank you.
Thank you.
For having us.